Hey everyone, just want to encourage you to find us on your listening platform and give us a rating. Anywhere you listen to that has a rating system, go on over and give us a rating and maybe leave us a review. Let us know your thoughts. These ratings really do help. Thank you so much for listening. On to this week's episode. Welcome back to another episode of Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Rolando.
And we have a special one for you today. If you've been listening to the last couple of episodes, you've heard us talk about the fact that we were invited to the Hoboken Historical Museum right over here in Hoboken, New Jersey, to curate and moderate a pair of queer documentary films for the Thomas Edison Film Festival. And it was last week, and it went great.
Yes, we had a very lively discussion. We talked about the films. We got the audience input on their films, and more importantly, our opinions.
Yes,
and
most importantly.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty insightful, lively conversation that we all had.
Yes, and the fun thing is that we actually recorded it for you guys, so you guys can be able to be part of the event that you probably weren't at by listening to this episode. So the way that this works is that if you're on a podcasting platform, go to the show notes or the episode description. You'll be able to find a link to the Thomas Edison Film Festival, and there you can actually watch the films. And we recommend that you watch the films first, and then you go back and listen to our discussion on them.
Yes, and they're two wonderful films. I highly recommend you checking them out. They are each about 25 minutes each, right?
Yeah, just about that.
Sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think there are two very, very well done pieces of documentary. The first one's a little more serious. It's also foreign. It's from Taiwan.
Yes, Taiwan.
And it centers around a drag queen, she is utterly fabulous. And the second one is about a hairstylist based out of Southern California.
Yeah, two completely different ones, but there is a unifying theme, and these are things that you'll hear us touch upon in the discussion. And yeah, it was a lot of fun, and we want you guys to be a part of it. And we never really get to talk about non-mainstream or non-Hollywood products, so this was definitely something that was just like a pleasurable experience for us. You know, we went to school and we watched so many of these short films, and we even made a couple of these films ourselves, so kind of getting back into that groove was really nice for us. And fun fact, I host trivia nights sometimes in my area, and a couple of days after this event, I hosted it, and someone who attended came up to me and was like, "Hey, I attended your event, and you did so great, and everything you guys said has kind of like stayed with me, and I've been kicking around in my head," which was just an unexpected treat. So
that's great, and hopefully I assume he.
It was a he, yes.
A listener now. Okay.
Yes, hopefully they are. Hopefully they are. And speaking of trivia nights, it is confirmed that if you are in the Jersey City primarily, but the New York, New Jersey area, mid-August, we'll get to you the date later, we're going to be hosting a queer media pop culture trivia night in person at a really, really cool bar, well, distillery technically, called Corgi. More info, stay tuned on that, but super excited for that.
Yeah, and if you want to stay up to date, obviously follow us on social media, because that is where we will drop most, if not all, of our updates. So
yes,
if you're not following us, you're missing out.
Seriously. Rolando, you got any news before we go into today's special episode?
I do not have any news at the moment. Nothing comes to mind. I'm sure I read something, but it wasn't important.
Yeah.
I know that as of recording, we're recording on June 22nd, this intro that Just Like That has begun. So the countdown has begun for Kim Cattrall's return.
Yes.
On And Just Like That.
I know that people are like super upset that leaked, because they're like, everyone's going to be super disappointed. She's literally going to say like 2 lines.
Oh yeah, no, it's going to be the camera's going to pan from her like high heel shoes up, and then she's going to say something catty, and that's it. The season ends.
Yeah. Just like you called it, guys. You got to go back to the Sex and the City episode that we did like a year or two ago. Rolando called it. It's so good.
I thought it's unfortunate that she held out for an entire season. She probably didn't think the show would last.
I know. Yeah, I hope they improve upon season 1 faultings. So, and
it's but the thing is, people are still going to watch.
Oh,
know?
100% they're still going to watch.
They're going to hate watch, but they'll still watch it because they love these characters so much.
Yes.
And I unfortunately am not in that boat, but I may watch the season finale just to see Kim Cattrall.
Because that's when we know she's coming. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the other fun thing about that is that apparently one of her stipulations was that she did not want to be at all with any of the other actresses. Like, she did not want to be filming at the same time as they were.
Wow.
So there's going to be an isolated shot of just her that we're going to be getting.
And they're going to fake it. That is...
Maybe like a stand-in, SJP.
Wow. That is something I do want to see.
The drama behind
Seriously.
it. I want to see. HBO should have been investing a documentary behind the scenes of making this cameo happen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Next week, we will be getting back to our regularly scheduled programming. We haven't really decided what we'll be doing because I know in 2 weeks is Indiana Jones. But next week, we'll still figure that out. But we will be back to our regular scheduled programming then. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
As I say incredibly confidently. But yeah, guys, watch the films. Trust me, they're really, really good, engaging films. And listen to our discussion. And next time we have an event and you're in the area, definitely come through. We're super nice and cool to meet in person.
I mean, sure.
All right. Well, guys, thanks so much. Happy Pride. Happy Pride Month. And let's kick this off and listen in on our conversation at the Hoboken Historical Museum with the Thomas Edison Film Festival. Listen now.
Welcome everyone to the Hoboken Historical Museum. We are doing a very special program in honor of Pride. It is June 2023, the most wonderful month of the year, Pride Month. I am delighted to be here to introduce Rolando Nieves and Nicole Palmetti, who I have to tell you a secret about them. They were my graduate students at New Jersey City University. But it goes way beyond them just being students of mine. They are two amazing people who just never quit. They're filmmakers, they're editors, they're activists. They're just totally amazing. And if they weren't amazing enough, what are they doing now? They are hosting the coolest podcast called Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals. Now, I know that they like to say that the new and cool thing about their podcast is that they are both queer and that they are Latinx. Well, which I love and I embrace, but that's not the only thing that makes their podcast great. I think that they are both so brilliant and they're both amazing cinephiles and they both really have the pulse of the country, the universe, and all things filmic. So if you haven't listened yet to Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals, what are you waiting for? So we're doing this special program tonight in honor of Pride, and it is my great delight to introduce Nicole and Rolando.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you guys so much for coming. We're gonna sit down, like we're professors or something.
This is it's our first official live show, so we wanted to feel special,
Yeah, and also we have a recording set up here, so it's a little bit more convenient. But yes, thank you guys so much for coming. Jane, thank you for that warm welcome. We've been doing this since 2018. Mm-hmm. And like you guys can probably tell from our title, Remakes, Reboots, Revivals, we typically talk about Hollywood mainstream films, right? But we do want to look at them from our own unique queer Latinx perspective, because recently films have been changing. More films are being made for a broader audience. And we're trying to deconstruct, how certain narratives are getting changed and whatnot. We don't really get the opportunity to talk about, at least in public forums, things that are not mainstream Hollywood. So this is just like a really, really unique experience for us. This is going to be a very special episode for us, so we're super excited about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, to piggyback off of what Nicole's saying, it's just like, this is a nice palate cleanser for us because I'm getting a little tired of some of, like, Disney remakes. Some are better than others. If you listen to some of our recent episodes, you'll know which ones we like and which ones we detest. But yeah, no, we're so happy to have you guys here. And, while you guys are here, be sure to subscribe to our podcast.
Do the thing.
There is a QR code on the papers that you guys have at your seats. And while you're at it, keep us in mind, in August, part of Jersey City Pride, we will be hosting a media, like a TV and movie
And pop culture.
Queer trivia at Corgi's, part of Jersey City Pride celebration. So keep us in mind. Check it out. Thank you. We're just trying to get our podcast out there so more people start following us and listening to us and stuff. So,
and you are being recorded. So
yes.
if you want to listen back to this episode or share with some of your friends, it will be up probably by next Friday. And with the link to watch the films that you are about to watch right now. So if you do want to rewatch these lovely films that we'll be watching, if you follow us, you'll have that link really easily at your disposal.
And more importantly, you share with your friends so that way they can watch the films and maybe listen to an episode and see the discussion that we all had.
Yes. And speaking of discussions, stick around for a little bit after the film because we're going to bring up some talking points and, generate a discussion about the films that we have watched. So, yeah. Jane, thank you so much for having us. Bob, thank you so much. We love always coming here to the Hoboken Historical Museum.
Let's give it up to Jane for curating these two wonderful films. I had the honor of watching these films earlier this week, and coming up with the talking points as we usually do for the podcast. Except usually in the podcast, I watch them sometimes the night before. So here I had a little bit more time to let him percolate, and I had the chance now to do a second viewing. So I think both these films hit a little different upon the second viewing. But I don't know, Nicole, anything you want to say to kick things off?
Well, these films work beautifully together, but they are two incredibly different films. So I was kind of wondering, did anyone have a preference as to which film hit them a little bit more? And just this is such an intimate setting too, so feel free to just, share any thoughts. I don't know. They both had such different tones. They both kind of had different mindsets as well. Did anyone feel one of them spoke to the other?
I felt the second one was more culturally something I could relate to.
Okay.
The American was a big part of it, and I just felt more at home with the second one, and I can't explain more than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm so glad that both these films are documentaries because I think both are two different types of documentaries that I feel a certain way about. So the first one, Leo and Nymphia, I guess my question for you guys is how do you guys feel about documentaries where the director self-inserts himself? Do you guys have any feelings towards that? Because I do.
The second one.
That's the first one. The first one.
Okay.
So the first one, the director is the one who goes into drag at the very end and has the interaction with his mother. That's the film director.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that is Pan. He's the film director, and part of the narrative that's weaving out is that he himself skews more conservative based off of his upbringing, and he has this cultural belief that his people's role in society is to contribute towards it.
Yeah,
and that's a little bit diametrically opposed to Leo and Nymphia when asked the questions well, how do you contribute to society? She's I don't care. She doesn't. And that is a complete opposition to the director's worldview. But she challenges him basically to try to break out of those conservative shackles. And the moment he does, though, you see he gets mocked by his mother. You see the stares he gets from the people in the building. And I think to me that's probably one of the most... I'm not a fan of movies where the director self-inserts. I'm usually not. I'm not... Yeah. I don't like Michael Moore's work. I don't like Morgan Spurlock. But I think this one, it did have an effect on me, mostly because, to your point where you said that the second one, since it's more culturally relevant, since it's a Western film and it takes place here in America, I think the truths that come out in the first film are universal. I do happen to believe that the reason conservatives are fighting so hard to silence queer people like us is because they're afraid of what they wish themselves to be. And I think that's the whole, that whole stigma about crying that, oh, drag queens, they're like groomers and pedophiles. But like we see time and time again, it's usually the people on the right who are doing these things, not the drag queens and stuff. So it's why I ended up. I think the first film was just fascinating for that read. That's my take on it and stuff. And I just went on a tangent. I apologize. I don't know, Nicole.
Actually, I have something to say about Leo and Nymphia and the young man, the filmmaker. When his mother sees him in drag and reacts so dramatically, and I think he's crushed.
Mm-hmm.
He's crushed. And to tell you the truth, that is a moment in the film that breaks my heart as a parent and now a grandparent also, because I mean, I just cannot imagine treating one's child in that way. It totally broke my heart, Rolando, at that very moment.
I'm actually Taiwanese, so that interaction is very typical. I guess even now it reminds me of my mother and how she, Asians grow up in a very negative fashion. You're always told like no, behave a certain way. So this is like the typical Asian upbringing to me.
But Leo and Nymphia's mother, look at how embracing she is, though.
Yeah.
Right?
They're sort of like mocking each other the whole time. It's not a loving relationship. It's like sort of like a comedy, but a very tragic comedy.
Are you talking about? You think it's tragic between Leo and his mother?
Well, it's kind of an abrasive kind of humor
So
that they're using against each other.
that's a valid point that I actually took more so in the second viewing of the film. However, I do want to point out that the times we do see Nymphia interacting with the mother, it's Nymphia, which made me wonder with this film. It's just like, because like this movie, the first movie breaks the fourth wall several times. One of my favorite times when it breaks that fourth wall is like in the B-roll setup when Nymphia is like going onto the street and she's commanding the camera, and you're also capturing her setting up the shots almost, right? That's breaking the fourth wall for documentary, because everything prior to that moment, the B-roll there was just B-roll in the sense that like it's beautifully shot and it's kind of just moving the story along. But that moment, we actually are seeing her take command and really embracing the character of Nymphia, which, on the second watch, I was wondering, just like, oh, is this interaction that we see between Nymphia and her mother, is that Nymphia the character, or is it Leo? Because Leo had admitted that he's shyer, and you do see the change in how he behaves when he's in and out of drag. So it was, yes, I do agree with you. It was an interesting dynamic that the two had, but it was a dynamic that we only saw when he was in drag, and I found that interesting. So I don't know. Again, this is a documentary where it's just like, and you have to take everything with a grain of salt, obviously, right? You don't know what's kept out of the editing room, but it made me wonder, what was left on the editing floor. You know.
And there is a performative quality when it comes to the art of drag in general, and I think that Leo and Nymphia in particular, this movie, it's like very fascinated, but also somewhat scared by queer culture. It almost was like looking at it, with protection in front of it, with like a glass wall in front of it. Because the way that the film begins is with a very interesting quote where, and I wrote it down, it was, perhaps Leo is less confident, he's always doubting himself. And there's just kind of this disconnect that Leo feels from himself. And he even kind of feels disconnected from Nymphia. He refers to her in the third person as well. And so it almost takes this commentary into thinking that there is something kind of detaching about being a queer person in this day and age. Because also with the filmmaker inserting himself and him coming to terms with what he might be, there is kind of like this where do I belong quality that was present in the film, which is not very present in the second film.
Yeah, I mean,
which is a nice
yeah.
balance. But still, like, I don't know, did anyone feel connected to that at all?
What struck me about the film is there was nothing gay about Leo Nymphia. We don't know if he... Here in the United States, people sort of assume drag queens perform in gay bars and the gay community. There's no way to know whether he, I mean, maybe he's gay, maybe he's not. It's not relevant in terms of making the film interesting, but in terms of the American perspective and what our politicians think about drag queens, it's for the American context, and we probably is gay, but there was no romantic, for both the director or Leo Nymphia, there's no romantic element.
Yeah,
True.
True.
And he performed in a straight bar. It looked like the audience was conventional.
True. Yeah.
Which I think is, I mean, here in America, at least here in Jersey, like when you go to a drag brunch, you do see a lot of straight couples. You know what I mean? So, but to your point, I do agree. That's actually something that gets conflated a lot. Like, drag culture does not necessarily mean gay culture. It's not, you know, even RuPaul's Drag Race, for example, they had a straight drag queen, which was like groundbreaking for the show, like most recently last season. And that's how far we got in gay rights, right? Where like one straight drag queen is just like, whoa, like, that's big. That's a big deal. But no, I agree with you. It's I think this is, I would say like Leo and Nymphia is more like a queer storytelling.
That's the difference for sure, I would say.
Actually, in the scene where Nymphia is interacting with the audience sort of after the show, you know, he was making these innuendos, and they definitely seemed queer to me. Up and whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that he's queer at least.
The other point I wanted to bring up actually about Leo and Nymphia was to this question, like, the first time I watched it, I did feel that the director may have been a little exploitative in his intentions of filming Leo and Nymphia, because he was using it almost as an excuse to explore this side of him that he himself was too afraid to explore. I don't know, does anyone, based off of just me saying that, does anyone agree, disagree, thoughts?
I would agree.
It makes some sense.
It makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it, but it makes some sense.
Yeah? Okay.
I just wanted to add in, there was a point where Leo spoke about unleashing the beast.
Mm-hmm.
And there was like a monologue. And what you just said really resonates, because I feel like that's what you're saying. It's like this performance allows others to release themselves. And it's almost like super, super ancient, right? Like an old ritual where you're reenacting something with a person as as a medium, right? That's what I was thinking about actually, and what you just said really resonated with me.
Oh, I'm glad. Yeah. Any other thoughts, Nicole? Like in terms of Leo and Nymphia?
No, I think actually you brought up the one
The
that I
book.
was going to get to.
Oh,
so.
I'm sorry.
Exploitative, it's okay.
But no. But so, why do you think though what? I mean, what are your feelings? Like, what made you feel that it was exploitative? Like, was there a scene in particular that made you feel like, oh, this might be a little exploitative?
It's all in the editing, really. You know, sometimes, especially when there were scenes of him in bondage and some of the sound bites that they would put, especially where he's like, I don't want to contribute to society, and cut to him doing something that, in the filmmaker's point of view, is kind of a fuck you to society. I felt very present in the filmmaker's perception of this man. And he almost went out of his way to present it as there's this disconnect between who he is and who he pretends to be, that maybe reflected his own disconnect of who he was. But because of that, I was like, I felt like he projected a lot onto Leo and Nymphia. Mm-hmm. Like I got almost too much of what he thought, personally.
So that's interesting, because I actually thought the shots of like, every time that we brought in like kind of high artistry was almost the opposite. Like he's asking, what do you contribute to society? It's art. I think that's what Nymphia's contribution to society is. It's this art form that she is doing, because like some of the makeup and the looks that she was putting out they were great. Stuff that I haven't seen, for example, on current seasons of Drag Race. It's a little lacking at the moment.
I mean, I connected with her, definitely, but I still felt the filmmaker's presence and at least his opinion of her. But as a character, I was able to sympathize more with her and not take so much of the forced opinion from the filmmaker. Although I did really enjoy the film, and it was interesting. I do felt like it was a little bit more exploitive than respectable. And he did make it a little bit too much about himself at the end.
There was one other thing that we didn't talk about the mother, Leo's mother. She was so alive and so proud of him as a child and so sensitive to that I think that her relationship with Leo and Nymphia is dense. It's not just one note, right? And I think that, as a child growing up and her love for him and how she letting him taking him to go to a school that was completely different, I think, than other Taiwanese schools. I think that's, kind of although again, I'm not Taiwanese, and I don't know what the school situation was. I could only deduce that it was, sort of a more unusual, not the normal, like what most kids would, the kind of school that most kids would go to. And that's great.
Yeah.
The other thing that we didn't talk about, actually, in this film, is that we never meet a male parent, do we?
Yeah.
I wonder why.
That's something also that stuck out on second viewing. I don't know if it's because even in the family picture that they show, it was Leo and his mother. So I don't know if the father was just not present in the thing, or if he's not present because he doesn't want to be associated with the son. That's kind of left up to the viewer's imagination a little, right? Like that's just ultimately, I guess like you had to fill in that blank.
And even in the second film, he was raised by a single parent.
Yeah.
The only time we see fathers are when we see these two male fathers.
Yeah.
These gay parents.
I think that's
so
a
there's
great
kind
segue.
Of like, a great segue into the second film.
Segue, because they go from only moms to two dads.
To two dads. Yes. I mean, such a contrast, but such a delight. And a good double feature. You should have like your serious film and as the first one, and then you should have something lighthearted in the second. And I mean, the joy that radiates off of Jeff and what he does for everyone in his life, like at the Halloween party, the contrast of them sort of being surrounded by blood and skulls, but they're like, oh, Jeff is just a light of joy. It was adorable. But it's also just so important because there are these people who have these ideas of, what queer people who they are and the impact that they would have on people's lives, especially children. And this is the exact opposite. And like more so than ever, we actually need more people like this in our lives or in our communities to kind of help bring us together. I mean, what did you guys think about in the second film? Outside the
right?
Yeah, right? Yeah. You want to be a part of that community. Yeah.
You were just Joshua Tree, we're so far away from home.
Yeah.
No, they're great. It was fun.
It was. I think it was a fun film. I think one of my favorite things about that film though is this like post-pandemic and especially during peak pandemic when like media was trying to tackle with how do you do storytelling during the pandemic. I think a lot of it ended up gearing towards like kind of how solitary we felt and how the kind of the mental anguish that we kind of went into. One of my favorite examples of this is probably like this reality TV show, absolute trash TV, but it's called Bravo Summer House. And they had one season where like all these beautiful 20-somethings were stuck in a house in the Hamptons, but because of the pandemic restrictions, you were stuck inside that house. So the cameras were just rolling 24/7. And you just see the mental deterioration of these people over 10 weeks. And it was kind of really that pure exploitation, but that was a lot of, I think that's what we saw in a lot of media, kind of just like how the pandemic was affecting us in the negative. And this was quite the opposite. We're seeing someone like persevere during the pandemic. I think that's like kind of wonderful to watch, especially considering he's a queer man, a gay man and stuff. And as members of the gay community, we've had to persevere so much. I mean, I wasn't old enough for the AIDS epidemic, but like some of you guys might have been. And you guys, again, the gay community had to figure that out for themselves. Most recently, the monkeypox epidemic, right? Like, no shade to the Biden administration, but like they just weren't moving fast enough. Mostly because our resources were so depleted because of the COVID. But it was gay men who had to like kind of band together and kind of make sure that people were getting vaccinated and like getting taken care of. So there was something about just seeing queer resilience on screen that I think was wonderful.
Like, absolutely. Now, did you feel the second film was exploitive in any way?
No, the only thing that might have been that could have maybe been exploited a little bit was this idea of they really focus on the fact that they're two gay dads, but they have a black son.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's something that was like you could see that maybe the director wanted to like go there, but they just didn't because that's something that I am kind of in the midst of figuring out. I'm married and we're trying to figure out adoptions, and I don't have a hard no on having a black child, but if given the I'll take whatever we can get, but I would prefer not to have a black child because I don't think I could relate. The moment he has to go through that black experience, I just do not think. I would feel so helpless because that's just something I could not be there for. Like the Latino experience is different. The racism that we face is very different from the black experience. And it's just like, I would just feel so helpless in those moments. And these are two white men who have to deal with the black son. And there's like that scene when they're asking, it's like, oh, so were you ever bullied? Is it for being black or having gay dads? All they can focus on is having the gay dads.
Yeah.
And I just found that so interesting. It's just like, so that means he's probably getting bullied because he's black, right? Like, that's the implication. I don't know. Did anyone notice that in the scene, in the movie?
Sure. Yeah.
Any thoughts?
I thought it was believable. I mean, I thought it was in the context. His parents have made a place for themselves. It may not be a big place, it may not even be a mainstream place, but they made a place for themselves clearly in the community, and they're loved at least by a certain segment. But I'm not sure, knowing what I know about the demographics of California, that there would even be, in that part of California, a large black community. So it's kind of like maybe the son is the black community, Cash is the black community. So in a way that's an opportunity to define it. But of course he's defining a lot of things by being the son of two gay guys. So where he'll take that. But I certainly noticed that sort of like pregnant pause and answer. And you don't know if there is an answer or there wasn't an answer. I sort of think all kids get bullied sooner or later for something. So I think it's part of growing up in America, whether you're gay or Latino or black or too feminine or too butch or whatever it is. I think sooner or later you're going to get something, and so I think the kids have, and most are, thankfully, resilient, and then they have to find their own balance and deal with it with some support from the parents, some support from teachers, of course, but ultimately that little group has to balance out because it's going to happen. You're too short, you're too tall, you're too skinny, you're too heavy. You got to find a balance. So, but I found a really sweet film, a happy film, as you said.
Yeah, really lighthearted, really nice. Fun watch. Yeah. One of my favorite scenes in the movie that just kind of like sparked something in me is when they're sitting down, the three of them, and Cash is talking about Michael, his other father, and he's like, he doesn't look gay.
Right.
But then there's Jeff, and like he does like a little sing. But it's interesting, the idea of looking gay, because I'm one of those people that quote unquote look gay.
No. You don't say.
So, but that's the thing, like the validation that some gay people feel, that they don't look gay enough, or that they don't scream it. It's like becoming this thing that I realized that in this film, I'm like seeing it more and more, which is interesting, like, do we have to look these things? Do we have to scream these things in order for us to feel connected to a community?
That's an interesting point because I do I know if you go to gay Twitter, like that's
Yeah.
constantly a discourse that's on there. Like, if are you,
You don't
too,
look gay, yeah.
You don't look gay. You don't act gay enough, right?
Yep.
And it's just like, well, who are you guys to dictate?
Well,
what
also,
it is?
I mean,
Like,
somebody had mentioned that it's like, well, we actually don't even know if Leo is gay.
Yeah, that's also
Because
true, right?
he didn't really like look it, or he didn't do anything to say it. So that kind of like, I don't know. It's so interesting that it's becoming part of the discourse too, where it's just like, are you gay? That
Yeah,
question that we get asked, and like, hey, I mean, I do it myself too all the time. So it was definitely one of the unintentional things about the film that kind of sparked something in me.
And isn't that true though? Hasn't that always been true in the Black community?
Are you black
Are you
enough?
black enough?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I just pre-screened a film for our next season, and that's the entire central premise of the film.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert! Right, this other short film that I just pre-screened.
Yes, and to the point about cash being black and whether that's exploiting it or not, I thought that the documentary was documenting. I really think that that's the reality we live in, and that's really the life we live in, and it was just a very natural evolution. I took it as the fact that that's the environment, and to the point of us, are we gay enough or not too gay or whatever, I think that then we're not giving ourselves room for diversity.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
We embrace each other and just, we are who we are, and there's room for all of us.
Watching it the second time, one of my questions I had is just like, damn, they stumbled into something here by accident, I feel like, right? Because they started filming before we knew there was going to be a pandemic.
Yep.
And then the story changes, obviously, as you're continuing to unfold. I think it seemed like this film was intended to be really about the museum
exhibit,
opening, right? I don't know if anyone here has seen Y Mucho Mucho Amor, Con Mucho Mucho Amor, the Walter Mercado documentary. Wonderful, right? So that documentary has a similar structure in which he is preparing for a retrospective exhibit, and that's the catalyst of which we see his life story unfold. And this is very similar in that sense, and I think it's very strong conventional storytelling techniques. But again, what is fascinating here is just like they stumbled into some gold because you're witnessing a man trying to make sense of this world, because you forget, like watching this reminds me like how shitty 2020 was. Like 2020 was a roller coaster ride, and it feels like a lifetime ago, but it was like 3 years. 3 years ago, and it feels like forever ago at this point.
Yeah.
And it's wild, and I think that's why I did like this portraiture of a man, because that's just a portrait of a man. You're also really witnessing like a moment in time that like I hope we never have to go through again in our lifetime.
No, for sure. Yeah. And I also liked how the movie unintentionally had like this symbolism with his hair.
Yeah.
And letting go of all of the weight of his hair and just moving on and growing up and all of that. Like, I was like, they didn't plan for that, but it worked perfectly.
It worked. And let me tell you, guys, like, a good haircut will take 10 years off your face. Like,
Absolutely.
Like, that is the lesson I learned here. But yeah, the other thing, that reminds me actually. I'm just going to go back to Leo and Nymphia real quick about the mom. The mom should always listen to Nymphia. Nymphia was right. That purple jacket was beautiful. That was a gorgeous purple jacket. So I loved watching these two films together because I think, did you see a common through line, Nicole? Like, what would you say?
The impact that queer people have in our lives, you know, in the first one on the filmmaker, in the second one in the communities, and how kind of important they are, and how we need people to push against the grain. That's like the big thing that I think was relevant in both, but I feel like there's others that I might be missing.
Well, I mean, for me, I saw more so artistry. That was my through line that I saw in these two films. And there's like this connection that there is between entertainment and queer, like just queer culture. Like not that we have a stronghold on it, but we do have a
pretty stronghold.
We have a pretty good stronghold on it. You saw someone who wants to.
There was that moment where Jeff was in drag in the second film, so I think it really highlights how big a difference there is still in the first movie. Drag is so serious and it's like not something so It's not accepted. Whereas in Jeff's movie, it's kind of like it's a passing reference and it's like matter of fact.
Yeah.
It goes to show. I think like in the 50s, we started doing all the civil rights stuff in America. And it's been 80 years since gays were really like, coming to the forefront. Whereas in Asia, it's still a very taboo subject. So maybe we'll see in 80 years, what kind of movie comes out about drag in Asia.
Yeah.
Or
And
similar.
yeah, and to that point though, I mean, this is where contemporary media plays a huge role, right? Like, I think something as ubiquitous as like RuPaul's Drag Race has a big role. Like, you don't have to enjoy the show, but you just have to respect like whatever cultural impact it does have in bringing drag culture to other parts of the world, because like this show is spinning off to doing franchises all around the world where they're highlighting drag queens from these different countries, and it's making drag culture mainstream. However, counterpoint to that though is that like because of that, you have conservatives now screaming, "No, get this off of our TV, get this off in front of our children," which reminds me. So I wanted to ask that, like, do you think Nymphia's performance would be child friendly?
Depends on. I think she could.
Yeah,
I mean,
no.
she was a princess in one of her numbers.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Just like an actress can do a role that's X-rated, she can also do a role that's like a Disney film.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because drag is diverse. Drag is performative, You're not just the same thing all the time. And drag isn't highly sexualized at all the time.
And it can, but it can be.
It can be, but it's
and
not
usually
all
you
the
put those
time.
restrictions
Yeah.
on the door before a child goes in. Like, usually,
Absolutely.
most people know what's appropriate and what isn't, and they know what type of audience you're going to have. If you're going to have a drag brunch in the middle of the day, where there's probably going to be families, you tame down your act. It's called common courtesy, that I think sometimes like the far right just thinks that we don't have it in our brains to do that, right? Like,
I know, yeah.
But no, yeah, that's one of the things, because I think we had a child here, right? Like, was some of the scenes here too scary for the kid?
Well, I mean, I'm a mother, and it's really important for me to raise well-rounded and inclusive kids who are empathetic and right. And to me, it was not at all scary. What's scary for me is aggressive, cis, male, predatory behavior. That's, to me, is scary. Policies that marginalize people and take away rights are scary. A man dressing in drag is not, in the least. So it's just part of raising a decent child, I think. And so not at all, I don't mind her being here. I wanted her to be here. I just wanted to add one more thing. The thing that struck me about both movies is both narrators expressed that they experienced bullying as children.
Yep.
In two totally different contexts. And that really struck me as a mom, and what can we do to protect our kids who are wrestling with their identity and coming out even in 2023. I think the assumption is that we've come so far, we're so much more progressive, even in a place like New Jersey, but I think there's so much essential work that needs to be done around creating that sense of comfort and acceptance for our kids.
Yeah.
And the thing that also struck me about both narrators is that they both felt they had to tap into this inner resilience in order to become the people who they are today, and to find that joy. Looking for that joy for them was an act of resistance. And that to me, I don't identify as gay, I'm a cis straight woman, but to me that is such an inspiration, and something that I think it can be a lesson for all people who are just striving to find their own voices.
Absolutely. I mean, so well put. Hi. I hope you enjoyed the movies too. No, I mean, yes. I mean, also, I mean, thank you for bringing your daughter and like obviously like exposing her to this kind of work because I think that is important. I think a lot of times, you know, all these policies that are trying to really silence us, they all come from a place of fear.
Yeah. Well, just like that scene where he said he was bullied because he was sitting there with like his Barbie doll house, and that people would bring it up well into high school, you know. But he was happy. He was just sitting there living his like happily. But it's more the fear that is brought up in them and their own insecurities that they just want to project back at other people. And now we're just seeing it, unfortunately, on a grander scale for all of us.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think some of the conservative women are just angry how good drag queens look in dress sometimes.
I mean, they look
Nymphia, those scenes of just Nymphia walking around in those like gorgeous outfits,
beautiful.
it's just like, oh, why can't more American women just dress like this on a regular basis? And men too, you know, like why not?
Whoever wants to dress
Whoever
like
wants
that,
to dress up like that should at all
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
But no, and more so to that point, I think that's part of the reason why we also wanted to be here today, just because I think it's important to have these types of discussions about queer culture, especially now because like I think we here in New Jersey can be easily feel very complacent. You know, we're in a liberal state, but it could slip away at any moment, right? So like you gotta constantly be reminding people to go out and vote. There are communities out here in New Jersey, I think in Southern Jersey and Central Jersey, that are trying to do book bans and stuff similar to the ones happening in Florida. And I think all we could do is just keep advocating, saying like, no, not here, not in our home. You know, let's keep this as a safe place for queer people and stuff. And
Beautifully
you know,
said,
yeah, if you can donate to your local queer organizations, I think the one for Hudson County is Hudson County Pride. So yeah, that's a big one. Check them out on Instagram. We're actually we mentioned earlier, we're going to be hosting an event with them in August, part of
Jersey City Pride. Yeah.
So please, by all means,
Yeah,
you're
there's
all
a
welcome
bunch
to
of
come.
Pride events. Yeah, we have somebody from Hoboken Pride too today. So
Yes.
we have so many resources.
Yeah. And anything else? Anyone else got anything to say? By all
I was
means.
just going to say I was a real fan of that second film. I mean, Jeff is, you know, it's almost like he'd be a great representative. Almost, I mean, if you're trying to reach out to a straight audience who are homophobic, I mean, he kind of crosses lines. Not that you know, that's an obligation to do something like that, but he's so. You know, his spirit is so strong, his resiliency, you know, and I have not seen a better portrait documentary in ages, and that a film that encompasses COVID, I haven't really seen that many that weren't, I just haven't seen that many, so it wasn't just about that, it was just sort of how he always is trying to make it work. And he's doing it in the desert. If anyone's ever been to Joshua Tree, it's dark. I mean, it's about the people, but the land is not the friendliest.
Wow.
Especially if you're from an urban, you know, lifestyle. And he just made a great life. And I think people would almost be jealous of what he's created. And I didn't really think about, shall we say, the adoption thing, because I was just so won over by him. And I just didn't want to pick it apart almost, you know. But I thought about it after you said it, but it didn't really even enter into my scheme. I just thought creating this museum, I love museums, but creating this museum on the topic he loves and making that work. And sort of reinventing himself again. So a beautiful film, and I'll highly recommend it.
Yeah, I forgot to talk about his sculptures. I think they were so beautiful.
Yes.
I think he's so creative, and I again just seeing the artistry between the drag and like his curation and actual sculpture work, and you know he's a musician and stuff. Like this guy is I'm jealous.
He's very
of everything he's done with his life.
Yeah,
you know,
he's a great role model.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he is.
And not for nothing, and talk about a role model, so is the filmmaker Cheri, Gaulke, and Cheryl Bookout. And, a shout out to both of them, and Cheri in particular, who was this year's winner of the Edison Innovation Award for the film festival.
Yay.
Her body of work, right.
Congrats to
Give
her.
it up for Cheri. So you can also see her work on the Thomas Edison Film Festival website. And Cheri right now is working on a rather amazing full-length feature doc about feminism in art, and it's going to be phenomenal, really phenomenal. And her partner in film, Cheryl Bookout, is equally an amazing human being. She is who came up with the idea for working with Jeff, because she too lives in Joshua Tree. So it's kind of a wonderful confluence. And I thought it's important for us to recognize the filmmakers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's usually the reason I do love coming to the Thomas Edison Film Festival. Is like occasionally you will get
You'll meet the filmmakers.
the filmmakers here
Yeah.
too, who talk about their films, and you can
And
pick
it's
their
only
brain.
short films too, so
Yeah.
you get to actually like see the people and talk to them and see like what, because we make short films on the side when we do stuff, and that's just like an art form that doesn't get enough like light shown on it. Everybody's
Right.
always talking about features. We have a podcast about that, but still, like it's this beautiful art form that just doesn't get highlighted enough. So Thomas Edison is just like the best for doing that. So, and thank you for inviting us tonight.
Yes.
And and thank you guys for sticking around and talking with us.